Okay, welcome everyone to SIG Apps. Today is the 8th of February. My name is Adnan Abdul-Hussein and I'll be leading us today. Actually, an announcement to kick us off is that actually this will be my last meeting that I'll be leading as the co-chair of SIG Apps. After a couple of years chairing SIG Apps, I decided to step down and focus on some other things. But I'm excited to announce that Maciej will be joining on as a co-chair in SIG Apps. So it'll be really exciting to see what you can bring to the table, Maciej, going forward.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm pretty excited as well myself.
Yeah, it'll be great to have someone on board who's a bit closer to the core workflows APIs as well. So pretty excited for that. All right, so jumping into the first discussion here, where should new contributors to the workflows controllers get started? So I know this is a question that tends to come up fairly often with new contributors. Is there something that we can do better to make it more clear where people can get started?
So this is Matt Farina. I'm the one who raised this question. And the reason I raised it is since our last meeting, I've had multiple people hit me up in Slack and just a direct message and ask that question. How do I get started? I want to contribute code. And I was looking for a way to give them something that's documented well, a place to get started, just to point them in the right direction. And we have a contributing guide over on the community repo, which is in dire need of some love. It's not in good shape and doesn't give good direction. And so I figured I wanted to ask the question here to see what people had to say. And these would be people who are just generally new contributors likely.
Thanks, Matt. Are there any newer contributors on the call who have recently gone through this and have some pains to share?
I'm a recently new contributor, not to Kubernetes, but to SIG Apps. And what I would suggest to newer contributors is to start with unit tests and perhaps even integration tests. I've noticed that our code coverage can be improved a lot. So those are changes that should be welcome. And then there is bigger Kubernetes issues. I mean, issues are across the whole project, such as structure logging. We are migrating to Klog v2, so those changes can be done as well. My question to the rest of the team would be, what's the best way to get reviews? Yeah, do we have a system for that?
Well, what do you reviews if you want to do a new contribution?
Right. Yes. At least in my experience, it's been hard to get reviews. I understand that people are busy, but if there is some, what's the best approach to ping on Slack, or if there is like a round robin kind of reviews? That's the question.
So Maciej is here. There are two topics, two questions being brought up. To answer the later with regards to reviews, I personally prefer when people reach out to me directly. I know that it's sometimes a little bit tricky and it takes a little bit more time. Like for example, the past 2-3 weeks, 90% of my time was spent on reviewing caps. And I was pushing the majority of the remaining reviews to this week and the remaining ones. But I think that probably the either direct messages or on the SIG apps, and people will pick up. The other thing is, it is tricky, and I'll probably slowly defer to the first question. It is tricky to know all the controllers like the tip of your finger, uh, and there's usually people that own certain parts of the controllers. Only a handful of people can easily dive into pretty much every single controller, and probably just reaching out to a particular expert of an area is the best option.
I would add that I guess my question would be to people who want to contribute, what is the goal of your contribution, right? Like, I think there are different paths forward. Like, we've been successful when people have had specific needs, either for their particular business that they work for, or for the community in general, where they were interested in diving somewhat deeply into a topic and into a controller, even if the time horizon was particularly long, in order to contribute there to achieve a specific outcome. Examples could be some of the stuff that Majek has done with Stateful Set, Aldo, some of the contributions you're making. So when people are interested in doing something specific because there's a goal in mind, I think it's easier for us to collaborate and help them shepherd it forward, even though we can still probably optimize our organization. If you're looking to make general contributions to Kubernetes core, the workloads controllers in particular might not be like the best place to get your initial commits. Aldo did call out some good ones with respect to things that you like. Unit tests are always welcome. If you want to try to help shape up conformance testing, definitely welcome. So tests are always welcome. Documentation improvements are always welcome. Website improvements are always welcome. But we're talking about APIs that have been V1 and that are complicated and utilized by most customers that touch the platform. So we have to be somewhat risk averse in terms of what we take in, and we have to be careful. And it does require kind of a non-trivial like starter mode of expertise in order to be able to, make really sweeping contributions. Like, most contributions to the workloads controllers, because they're V1, are probably going to start with a cap, right? So, if there's functionality that people are looking to add because they have a need, we can help with shaping that cap and helping get that cap through, and then helping the contribution go through. But if it's more like, I want to start contributing to Kubernetes and I want to get my first initial commits in, then I would go back to what Aldo said earlier. There are probably like small, good first issues, but there are not that many of them. And, it might not be like, for many contributors that come to the project, I think the initial commits that I've seen them do over time, they'll start with like features in the CLI or minor API things. And then from there, get deeper and deeper in. They generally don't start with things like scheduling or controllers or like deep into the API machinery or core networking, unless they have specific features that they're looking to add in those domains.
Yeah, I would second what Ken just said. The baggage of the initial knowledge is pretty big. I'm pretty sure that we could work on maybe tagging some of the good first-time issues, and probably tests are a good one. We have Ryan on the call, and we've been talking about this topic for quite a while. And I'm pretty sure that adding or changing one of the pre-existing tests and promoting them to conformance is a good way for someone to dive into how the controller works and provide that contributions. So for bigger, yes, go ahead.
My only hesitation about pointing someone at conformance tests is that might be a frustrating experience given the level of sign off you need to actually merge your PR for updating something to conformance. I think you need to get like Brian, Clayton, Joe, or Brendan to sign off, basically.
Yeah, SIG architecture. I think they have their own conformance group, but yeah, pretty much so.
For the unit tests, do we have issues that are marked as good test issues for some of the ones that are missing?
I doubt that we have. I think that the easiest way to figure out what we're missing with regards to units is just probably running them locally, and it's a little bit of discovery. I do hope that the majority of our controllers were written in such way that the critical pieces are highly tested, with probably going down a little bit more over time, but just running locally and trying to figure out what could be the most critical pieces and comparing that with coverage reports would be my suggestion.
The coverage reports last time I ran them weren't terrible. The way, especially with Golang, the way the controllers are written, achieving very high coverage, like say above 70, 80% might be difficult, but possible if that's what we're looking to do. Though it's not clear to me that in all cases, achieving high code coverage guarantees that your code is bug free. And I could point to literature that kind of says that's not necessarily the case. I would say that one thing that we do have that might make contributing slightly more difficult is that the way the unit tests have evolved over time, it's been very much feature based, right? Like we have unit tests that have been there since forever, and that haven't been refactored. And then as new features have been added to each controller and as the API versions have evolved, we've added kind of layers of unit testing on top of it. But we haven't gone back and really like comprehensively refactored the unit tests in order to do something that's like, to make it more, I guess, comprehensible and more easily digestible. So, I mean, that would be the only thing I would say there, though, is the scope of doing that would be like somebody with like a really good QA background who's super interested in testing. So, I mean, maybe probably not a good first issue. That's kind of like something, if we're interested in addressing that, that would need to be like led by somebody who knows them pretty deeply and so forth.
Something easy I've noticed around that, a lot of our tests are old, so they have not been written with t.run. And whenever you do a new feature, it's very useful to have those in place already, so you can filter your subtests. So that kind of refactoring, making those changes, I think it will be very useful for the future.
I was recently entering the SIG Apps space. I was helping him to kick off the cron job controller. I know that he wants to share his thoughts as well.
Yeah, I think I like to second some of the thoughts that have been raised here. It is important to come in with a specific goal. Certainly, in my example, I had a rough idea that I would want to help with cron jobs API and the controller. So, and then again, seconding Marty's point that he raised earlier, that once you have that goal in mind, you can find out people who can guide you with that controller. So for me, it was Mate. It helped me a lot. I think one point that I want to raise that was harder for me, at least to get started, is that it is. I couldn't find an easy way to start the controllers on a local machine to test. It certainly needed a little hand holding to get me started there. So I'm not sure if we can do anything about that, but that is certainly one thing that slowed me down on the path of development.
Ale, is that something that we can improve through tooling or documentation?
I think having documentation would really help. Yes. Like we don't need to have like polished documentation, but maybe some hacking guide or something like that that would help developers to get local environment started. Maybe that would help.
Mm-hmm.
And also regarding the unit testing, I think someone raised the point that our unit tests evolved over time, and yeah, I think I certainly see that the case in cron job controller. That is, the tests, the pattern of test being used was fairly old, and I think with even with the new controller, it's the same pattern because we didn't get time to refactor all of that. So it might take some time, or it might take at least a good amount of learning curve to dig into that pattern and get started with newcomers. So I'm not sure. Like it might be controller to controller, case by case basis of how hard or easy it would be to get started. At least in the current up case, it was a little time consuming, and I needed some sort of help to crop that. So yeah, that is my journey.
Thanks a lot for that feedback.
Maybe that's something that we could cover during the upcoming KubeCons SIG Apps session, maybe some kind of a hacking, how to hack on a controller type of a demo, and then we could probably reuse that one as a pointer to newcomers.
I think that'd be great, yeah, if we can do that and have it recorded as well. Sounds like there's some areas to contribute that might be hard to write down as issues in the queue. Maybe that's another thing that we can point out in these calls. It's just every meeting, just kind of talk about some of the things that are still open and need contributors. Matt, did you have anything else to add on this question, or?
Nope, I just wanted to bring it up since I was getting pinged about it.
Cool, thank you. Looks like we are regarding the testing. You said the conformance folks have some tools around that.
Yes, I'm from a company called II Corp. We are contracted to make conformance happen, and we developed quite a few tools. The difficult thing is when you're writing conformance tests to determine whether you're actually hitting the endpoints or not. And we developed quite a few tools. You're all probably already familiar with the API Snoop webpage, which shows you which endpoints are conformant and which not. And with API Snoop comes Snoop DB, which you can install locally on a kind cluster. And you can actually run Snoop DB against any Go test that you might write and see whether you are touching any endpoints. So basically clear all your events, run your test, use SnoopDB and you can actually look back and see which endpoint was hit. So if there's anybody interested in conformance testing or just E2E testing, and we can show them how to either promote them to conformance once they've been accepted, take them through the process, because it is a bit of a tricky process and you have to go to conformance meeting and get people to sign off on those. It is a tedious process. That's what we do permanently. We have tools, we have expertise. I'm not personally the expert, but we have people that really can show them around how to use the tools and make things easier. If people reach out, we can support them.
That's great to hear. Okay, moving on here is updates on some working flights. So we have the cron job cap.
The cron jobs are in place. I'm in sync with Ally. Ally already has some fixes for the old controller. I'm currently working on changing the feature gate to default, and I'll be in the next one up is to get the API for cron jobs to V1, which will be happening later this week. So we're hoping that in the next 2-3 weeks at most, we should be able to cover the controller part and start cranking the E2Es, because as one of the requirements, we need to add conformance tests for cron jobs. So yeah, it's on track.
Great. Are we looking to include it in 121 or? Yeah,
121 is when the new controller is becoming the default one, with the ability to disable it if one requires to the old one. And the cron job API is moving to stable.
Fantastic. Thanks, Matthew. Next thing here is PDB to GA. So it looks like there's some PRs that are ready for review on this.
Yes, there's some PRs. The cap has been merged, and these are the PRs to implement some of the changes that was outlined in the cap.
Your audio is a little difficult to hear, Morten, but I think you said these caps, the cap has been merged, and these PRs are just implementing the changes.
Yeah, that's what I understood.
Yes, yeah, these are PRs that are implementing some of the features that was outlined in the cap.
Great. Looks like Janet's already came to reviewing some of these. Yeah, great. Glad to see that that's on track. Anything else on PDBGA?
No, that's it for now.
Cool, thank you, Morten. Next up here is Rian, questions on conformance progress.
What we've done is to help track where we're going with conformance. We opened an umbrella issue, and basically in there, it's just a summary of things that we shared in Google files, and just get it formally into the repo. And I basically divided it into different endpoint groups, showing what's tested and what's not tested. Damon said we are working on at the moment. We have a working test, but it's not touching status, and we got some very good feedback from the conformance meeting this week about the way status should be tested, because there's a bit of controversy about status for all endpoints across Kubernetes. And there was a lot of discussion about that. So we'll probably get that in and ready in the next week. Then stateful set, there is, for the patch of the stateful set scale, there's one test that just needs review and approve. That can go in, so we'll touch that. And then the scale test is very much across stateful set, deployment, and replica set doing much the same. So we are busy creating a similar format as the stateful state scale test to do the read, replace, and patch of the stateful set scale, or then the deployment and also replica set scale. So that's what we have in the pipeline at the moment. For the rest, everybody that's interested in getting involved with E2S test writing or conformance test writing, this is a good place to start to see what's not have any tests. There is, well, in the previous meeting, I did mention that I'll get back about what has tests that could be promoted, which already have valid E2E tests that is touching the endpoint, and it does come up in the audit logs, but there's actually only one endpoint that have that. If you look at, let me just see, I think the last hyperlink in that right at the bottom, E2E test status, if you click on that hyperlink, it will show you, sorry, I'm just waiting for it to come up. Yes, then you'll see there's basically one test, a replace app namespace replica set. If I recall off the top of my head, it's a, by the way, it's kind of a drive-by. It is touched by something else coincidentally. It's not a targeted test. So that's actually the only existing test that is tested, but not conformance tested, that could be promoted, but as it's just a drive-by, it's not valid. So basically everything on the left-hand side you see there in basically white. If you flip over them with a mouse, you'll see there's the other E2E apps endpoints. And those are all that's in the umbrella issue. So we opened this, and if there's any questions, please reach out. Let us give you information, help you share our tools, and we really like to help. We're doing all we can from our side, but if there's anybody contributing from your side that need help about the conformance process, please reach out. We'll help to get things going.
This is great. Yeah. Thank you for this update.
And even you are planning to get a cap in with new APIs that should have conformance tests. Even when you get to the point when you want to test those, please reach out. We can help you, show you around how API snoop work and what it does. To be sure that once promoted the test, it's actually going to show up as conformant once you're done. Because part of the CNCF requirements is actually nothing is allowed to go to GA and be merged in at the end of a release unless it got conformance test for all new endpoints coming to GA. So we would like to help you, and keep in mind that test freeze is in 24 March. If I remember off the top of my head, I think it's 24 March. We've got test freeze. So your tests have to be in by then, and you also need a 2 weeks flake-free run on the test grid. So the first process is get your PR merged. I'm probably preaching to the wrong people. You probably know all this. So your PR must be merged and in on the test grid 2 weeks before test freeze, so we can actually create the conformance PR to get it into conformance. So it's actually, the timeline is quite tight to get it in 121, just as a note, if that helps.
That's good to know. Thank you. Yeah, if anyone is interested in helping out with some of these conformance tests, it'd be great if you could check out this issue and get involved.
Thank you.
Rian, are you the right person to reach out to if people have questions around how to?
Yes, you're welcome to reach out. Hippiaka is probably, most people in the community know Hippiaka. He's the master. He would probably guide people around. Then we've got Stephen, Caleb, we've got a few test writers. I am more the project manager looking after things. So I am not the primary code contributor, to be honest, but I do know how to get you around. So please reach out and we'll happily help, either in Slack or I'll drop my email in there as well in the agenda.
Great, thank you so much.
Thank you to you guys.
All right, that's all we had on the agenda. We have 25 minutes left, so we can go through a bug triage, or if there's anything else anyone wants to bring up to discuss, now would be a good time. It's like there's no other discussion topics, so we can do a bug triage. Let's see here. During a rolling update, replica start gets caught in exponential backoff, causing unnecessary delay of up to 16 minutes. Is anyone able to look into this one?
I don't. What the heck? Can you scroll it down a little bit?
Sure.
Just give me a second. $13 seconds. So are they sure it's the controller that's not launching the pod? That's one thing I don't. You got running available, running available, running available, and then the new one doesn't look created. So it's caught an exponential back off. But what is, so what are they asking for? They're saying we have exponential back off because of insufficient quota.
Huh.
So they want to customize.
They want to customize the exponential backoff.
I think this requires some thought at a minimum, given what they're asking. I could take a look. I think Janet, would you want to tag her as well?
Okay. I'll CC both of you. There's you. There you go. Is that right? Okay.
I think I might have some idea what they mean. It looks like they are creating. They hit a wall because of quota, and then when one of the terminating previous replica sets actually goes down, they would want to see immediate creation. But since we previously started and we got into the loop of exponential backoff, there's no turning back. And they think that because there is a spot, we should create a new controller instantly. But they just hit the exponential backoff, and they hit it sufficiently amount of time that we are towards top of the spectrum of the backoff, which means every next retry is happening every significant amount of time. I think the max might be the 16 minutes that they're talking about.
No, I actually think the max is like 5 minutes or something like that, right? But they probably hit the max, and it's iterated max, like they're at the tail end of exponential backoff hitting multiple times, right?
True.
So, and that sounds like what's happening. But the thing that I think is interesting to me is like maybe we should at least consider the ability to configure the exponential backoff parameters, because like my trivial answer to this person is like increase your quota. Like you need to have a little bit more headroom and you won't have a bad time. Like right now, it seems like they're very tight to capacity and they're only able to redeploy their new replicas in the event that they kill off some old ones because they very, very tightly pack their cluster, which is something we don't advise that you do. So like there's the issue of here's how you can have a better time. But it's worth at least maybe talking about whether we should have some ability to override the exponential backoff parameters. And like we might actually have exposed that already. I'm not sure that we have though.
Yeah, but even if you end up in the same situation and the backoff is configurable, you will eventually hit the max for the exponential backoff. I would be cautious adding the ability to configure this because a lot of time
it's a foot gun.
Yes.
It's a foot gun for sure. And like,
yes.
The question would be like, if we did it, I mean, it's a foot gun, but it's one that's hidden in a closet, right? Like, I don't think anybody, only people that would really want to tweak it would probably touch it. Like, I don't think it would be a feature that you would expose like, oh, and by the way, here is a really great tunable for you to use. But it might be, I think it's at least worth thinking about is what I'm saying. Maybe not though. I mean, I'm suggestion otherwise.
I'm willing to bet that as soon as we open that one up, we will get an issue which says, I shot myself in the foot. So
I mean, it's fair, but we can at least come with a response.
True. But yeah, I would commend with regards to probably the room. There's also the ability to remove the old replica set. I can't remember the exact name. The history parameters, which by default are, I can't remember if we set it to more than 1, 3, or 6, something like that sits in my head. Maybe he can tweak it to something smaller. This way he won't be having too many old replicas sitting around if he wants to have tightly packed app.
Where were you thinking we could expose the backoff configuration, Ken?
I hadn't put that much thought into it. That's why I said let's tag it and take a look at it later.
Good. Okay, need to keep the application running, but require to restart the entire pod instead of just a container.
Huh. I don't know why this is us. Well, I mean,
If it's at pod level, I would say that the node team should look at it.
I would say architecture, like you're talking about changing the fundamental behavior of Kubernetes to have something, like you're adding a completely new life cycle for the pod.
Looks like architecture and node are both tagged.
I mean,
Yeah, we can leave this to them.
you can leave. I think you can leave our SIG on there just because, like, I would like to continue receiving notifications for this. I think because if this does progress forward, there probably are implications for controllers. Even though, like, I mean, so like, let's say you add a third pod lifecycle or another pod lifecycle for job for all the batch workloads and all the stateless serving workloads. We're still going to have a default that basically you can't change, right? Like deployment's always going to be set to always. If there's another request to have that to be configurable, we should be aware.
Yeah, there's a link PR that basically allows setting restart policy to never. But that's only for replica set, surprisingly. At the bottom, there is a link PR.
Oh, yeah.
Not the issue. The previous comment. No, the second from the bottom.
Oh, sorry.
Or that one, yeah.
Yeah.
That's bad. This can't land. Not without a discussion.
Huh.
I'll put a hold here just to make sure this doesn't land.
Who is pushing this forward?
I don't know.
Whose PR is this?
I think they're just random people just fixing stuff.
It's not really fixed. I mean, that's. So a replica set is not really designed to work with a restart policy of never. I'd be curious to see if they were able to get this to work in a like.
Well, it might have some weird fallouts that one might not necessarily expect.
I mean, it would have like. Oh, they just changed the API to allow it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, they haven't made any other changes.
I mean, like that should just be closed. Like, there's no thought into how this would actually interact with the controller, modifying the controller to support it, which is something you'd have to do before enabling in the API, putting an alpha gate around it. This requires at a minimum a cap.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, that's what I said there. I put a hold in there. Thankfully, it's from someone for outside, so it's not testable by default. But then there's additionally my hold, so we should know.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's not generally clear that we should do this, but like, you know, if the rest of the community thinks we should, okay. But if we're going to, we need a much more structured approach.
Do we want to have someone? I guess we weren't sure if we should have some of the other SIGs pick this up. Yeah, we can leave SIG Apps tagged here and just follow the updates.
Yeah.
Change the number of replicas, create delete pods, immediately paused, or immediately during pause deployment state.
So I'm not actually sure about this. If you pause the deployment and then you do an update, like say change the container image, so scale and updating, when you change the number of replicas, you're scaling the deployment. You're not modifying the deployment in place. So definitely if like, let's say you updated the resource requirements for, or limits for one of the containers or labels or something like that, with a pause deployment, you shouldn't get a new roll out, but I'm not sure what the original intended behavior of simultaneously scaling a pause deployment was supposed to be, or if we ever communicated the official, like something official about those semantics. I would tag Janet.
So first they scaled it out here and then paused that scale out and then changed the image. But then we're seeing new pods with the old image. Is that?
Well, so right, so okay, it seems like they paused it then scaled it, right?
But also changed the image, right?
Right, but if you change the image, you basically have locked the template with the pause, right?
Yeah.
So you shouldn't see, and that's what I'm saying. This is kind of a, I don't know if we ever officially had a stance on what was supposed to happen if you do this. It's sort of something that's, I guess, sort of kind of unanticipated. It's like you're going to pause your deployment, then you're going to scale it or scale it while it's paused.
Yeah, I feel like I'm not sure what the right behavior should be here.
Before eventually jumping into any conclusion or fixing, because I've noticed there's a PR already open to solve this, we should consider whether anyone is actually relying on that behavior. Because I'm pretty sure that if we, for example, decide that, oh, if it's paused, nothing should be happening, it is possible that somebody will show up and will say, well, yes, but I rely on that behavior that was rolling up, even though it was paused.
Well, in particular, the reason I was saying we should definitely investigate what we say we were going to do is because I can see a use case where, like, you pause a deployment in order to stop the rollout of some modification, but all of a sudden you need extra capacity in order to keep something up. So you scale it up. If I'm scaling up a deployment, so I have a deployment in flight, it's going badly. I pause it because it's going badly, but I need extra capacity. If I up a number of replicas, I want the previous image in my scale up. Like, this is the behavior I would want to remediate a lack of capacity in production during a failed rollout. So I would not want to change it. But my question is, like, is there a reason why the user expects something different? So I would want to look at the docs and say, like, okay, well, why would you anticipate it working any other way than it actually does? Like,
yep.
So if you have image A and you roll out image B hits infant mortality, it's dying. So you pause the rollout to stop rolling out more instances of image B. But now you don't have enough image A to serve the QPS that's ingressing to your cluster. So you up the replication. In thinking about what I would want in that instance, I would want more of image A to roll back out, so I have enough capacity to get right before I deal with what's going bad with image B, right? Like, that's not what I would actually advise people to do. I would say, okay, you have a bad deployment, just roll it the hell back to whatever was working. But I could see a use case where someone might do that or depend on that behavior in a production environment. So I would be hesitant to change it. But I would like to at least see what did we in the docs tell people the behavior should be with respect to scale versus pausing, like, rolling out the declared desired state of the actual pod. Like Vijek said, like, likely there's someone depending on this behavior.
I'm just looking at the doc that Adnan opened. The question is how you can understand you can pause a deployment before triggering one or more updates and then resume it. Whether scaling is an update, theoretically, yes, it is. Should we treat scaling up, down differently than, let's say, changing an image? I know that we have a separate endpoint that is designed just to express the scale, but for controller, there's no difference if somebody called a scale or directly modified the replicas. How should controller know that this was through scale and it should only do scale versus much more? And with that, I would probably treat a scale similarly to any update.
Yeah, interesting. I tagged Janet in it. If anyone else want to take a look at this. We can maybe have time for one more. Metrics for job controller. It's Aldo Sonopol.
Yes, that's me. I'm planning to initiate a cap next release, but yeah, this is to gather feedback.
Okay. Thanks.
Yes, definitely yes. That's my simple answer. Yeah, we're very aware that we're missing those bits, and we're adding them recently since when we're touching the code.
Okay, great. I think that's all we have time for today. Yeah, thanks everyone for joining, and see you all in 2 weeks.
Thanks,
See you.
bye.
Bye bye.